Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a franchise that has captivated fans with its extensive anime series, but the manga often presents a treasure trove of unique and sometimes overlooked cards. While this channel typically focuses on the anime, today we're delving into the fascinating world of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga to spotlight some truly extraordinary cards that might have flown under your radar. And when I say Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, I'm talking about the spin-offs too. What's intriguing about manga cards is their tendency to be even more outlandish than their anime counterparts. So without further delay, kicking off our list is Deja Vu. This card is wielded by Yami Bakura in his duel against Yami Yugi during the Battle City arc. This card boasts a special effect that's as intriguing as it is potentially game-changing. Upon activation, it resets your opponent's field to its state from the previous turn. However, it's important to note that spell and trap cards are not included in this rewind. The strategic value of Deja Vu is highly situational, hinging on the context of the duel. But imagine a scenario where your opponent has amassed an array of boss monsters in one turn, starting from an empty field, only to have Deja Vu strip them away by reverting the field to a previous state where they had none. I think it's also safe to assume that it doesn't really destroy the monsters either, so effects triggered by destructions are not activated. In the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, Deja Vu is unleashed by Bakura to orchestrate a field reversal. By activating this card, all monsters are teleported back to their locations from the last turn. Then, each player is able to special summon all their monster cards that were on their side of the field during the previous turn from their hand, deck, or graveyard. This move results in the return of Dark Necrophore to the graveyard, reactivating the Destiny board's effect. Bakura was close to winning as he only needed the final letter to the Destiny board, and had Yami Yugi locked to one attack per turn, which could also be negated. That being said, it allowed Dark Magician Girl, Kuribo, and Gamma the Magnet Warrior to make a re-entrance from the deck and graveyard onto Yami Yugi's field, which then led him to summon Slifer the Sky Dragon. The ability of Deja Vu to reshape the battlefield showcases its unique power, making it an unpredictable card and potentially a ruling's nightmare. Next, we have Card of Desperation, a wild card used by Kaito in the Zexal manga. It appeared in the 27th chapter in a duel between Kaito and Hishakaku, an underling of Kyoji Yagumo, a major antagonist in the Zexal manga. This card redefines high risk, high reward with its unbelievable effect. Draw 3 cards and then dump your entire deck into the graveyard. This effect is a game changer, potentially setting up for devastating combos. The synergy with other graveyard-based strategies is unparalleled, making it one of the most astonishing effects in all Yu-Gi-Oh! Media. There's absolutely no way that this card will ever get printed unless they give some heavy restrictions. For example, they could change the cost to banishing your deck face down to draw 3 cards instead of sending it to the graveyard. But I can still see the card being played even if that was the case. That being said, this card's power was shown in Kaito's duel with the next card on the list that comboed with Card of Desperation. Gravier Rebound is another gem from Kaito's arsenal, offering endless possibilities for those who can strategically send it to the graveyard, which is very easy. The effect of this card is, when this card is sent from your deck to the graveyard by an effect, it returns to your deck on the next turn. On this turn, you may activate spell or trap cards from your graveyard. There really is no limit to manga cards. This card was made to FTK. A card this powerful could never exist without completely changing its effect. Or they could potentially make it so that you can only use one spell or trap card. In the real life card game, you can easily send this to the graveyard with Foolish Burial Goods, which sends any spell or trap card from your deck to the graveyard. This card's potential, if it was ever printed, is endless. It could easily be one of the most broken cards ever printed, even with some restrictions. In the Zexal manga, Kaito uses Card of Desperation to send his whole deck to the graveyard, which then activates Gravier Rebound, which puts itself back on top of his deck. That allows him to activate from his graveyard the card Eternal Bond, which special summons his Photon monsters and concentrate their attacks to Galaxy Ice Photon Dragon. They really use some broken cards to make some underwhelming combos. Gravier Rebound and Card of Desperation are probably one of the most insane effects in any Yu-Gi-Oh! Media, and funnily enough, they were both in the same duel. Next up, we have a very powerful card that makes you and your opponent draw cards. Spell Books from the Pot. Just like Pot of Greed, it has a very simple non-once per turn effect to draw cards. However, Spell Books from the Pot allows you and your opponent to draw 3 cards. You could also technically consider this card to be a less powerful version of Card of Sanctity. Although they have different kinds of effect, since Card of Sanctity does not guarantee to draw you cards since the effect is until both players have 6 cards. And spellbooks from the pot allows you to draw 3 cards, which means that if you have 6 cards in your hand, you can still draw the 3 cards that the card allows you to draw. I don't think I have to explain why this card would be too powerful for the actual game. While it does give your opponent some cards, since it is a spell card, you're most likely activating it on your turn. So you're most likely to use the cards before your opponent gets the chance. Well, unless your opponent draws hand traps, but that's a risk to be taken. The card was used in chapter 33 of the GX manga, in a duel between Jaden and Chaz. Another card used by Jaden in the GX manga is Magician's Library. It was used during a duel between Jaden and Bastion in chapter 28. Once again, it has a simple yet powerful effect. This card grants the player the power to search for any spell card, an ability that's incredibly advantageous for virtually any strategy. The ability to search for any spell card typically comes with a significant cost. In the TCG, we have stuff like Left Arm Offering, which requires you to banish at least 2 cards from your hand and prohibits setting cards afterwards. Like a lot of older spell cards, this card lacks a once per turn restriction, and it can also be searched by itself, so in theory you can use Magician's Library to search another copy of it, which reduces the amount of cards you have in your deck, and then you can search the actual spell card that you want. This gives your deck a consistency boost. Instead of having a 40 card deck, you actually have 37. That being said, given its ability to fetch any spell card without limitation, it will likely be deemed too powerful for competitive play in the TCG and face immediate ban. To even think about letting this card hit the actual card game, we'd definitely need to slap on a major handicap, like waiting a turn or two before the effect kicks in. That way, its crazy powerful effect gets a bit of a balance check, and of course, a hard once per turn restriction. For our next card, we have Pillager, a standout card in Bandit Heat's arsenal. It resembles the effects of Forceful Sentry, but pushes the envelope by not only revealing the opponent's hand, but also allowing the user to steal a card. It was featured in the duel between Bandit Heat and Joey in chapter 64 of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist manga. This card fits in with the early gameplay of Yu-Gi-Oh!, where powerful cards were played with little to no restrictions. This card takes the strategic advantage of hand knowledge to the next level, surpassing even notorious cards like Confiscation and Delinquent Duel. The ability to see and then pluck a card directly from your opponent's hand is an invaluable tool in any duel, providing both insight and disruption in a single move. Furthermore, just like any other spell cards from the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh!, it doesn't have a hard once per turn. For the final card of the video, we have Zero Gate of the Void. This card offers an interesting parallel with Kiryu's Infinity Zero from the anime. This card comes into play in chapter 32 and 33 of the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's manga during an intense duel between Kiryu and Jack Atlas. It has a pretty dramatic effect. When you have no cards in your hand or on your field and your life points hit 0, you can activate this card from the graveyard. It allows you to special summon Void Ogre Dragon. However, if this card is destroyed, you immediately lose the game, but all other defeats are negated. This is pretty reminiscent of the card Relay Soul, where the destruction of the summoned monster results in an automatic loss. Zero Gate of the Void comes with a set of conditions that are pretty strict, needing the player to have no cards in control or in their hand, just as their life points hit 0. While it sounds daunting, players familiar with the Infinity archetype, which thrives on playing with no hand, might not see this as an impossible feat. However, the rule stating all other defeats are negating really throws a wrench into things, especially in multiplayer duels. What could this mean? Could this mean that if one player activates this, everyone else wins by default? This phrase alone really opens up a lot of confusion about this card's rulings, but it is an interesting card nonetheless. So these are some cards that I found pretty interesting from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga. It really shows that the Yu-Gi-Oh! Mangas are very different from the actual card game, even more than the anime. So what are your thoughts on these cards? Or do you think I missed some crazier cards on this list? Feel free to post them on the comments down below. As always, thanks for watching and see you next time.